Good afternoon, maybe already. I understand that we are running out of time. Thank you to the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity. So, well, the title is very broad. I will present a tectonic part. My idea is that at the beginning of mining and oil exploration, both, it is always better to have the best geology as possible. This is what the presentation is about, but we also need to have an open mind. And I wanted to present Peru's geology like this, where you can see different things than with the current map, with the regular map, I would say. I cannot dwell here, but this is in a nutshell what it is about. I will speak about tectonic at the Andes. There's a number of causes which have acted. It's not only because it was out of compression or induced compression. I think that there's compression, extension. So I think that this is not working. But anyway, these are classic tectonics. Also gravity. There's gravitational phenomena, extensional, compressional, and also transcurrent. This is what they include. And there's also intrusions, magmatic, but evaporite intrusions, and in some cases, shales and muds, which is not much. But here I will devote to extension, a little bit of compression and saline tectonic, well, and tectonics. I will give you an example of south of Peru. This is a map published in 2015. Chilean geologists who have never worked in the area except for publications or information which is publicly available. They map reverse faults. This is what they normally map. Actually, this stems from a thesis that goes back 10 years of all the faults that we could find in the breccia map. This is a strong contrast. When you take a look at reality, you find that the alleged reverse faults are mistakes. And I will give you another example. Here below, you see, this is taken from a publication, but it doesn't matter. I have reoriented this. This is a reverse fault, but when we take a look at the fault in Google Earth and in the field, we see that the fault presents a north deep to the left, and this is a normal fault, which is a reverse one. And there are tens of cases like this. The interesting thing of this normal fault is that a fault might be determined by the rejection, not the striated characteristics. So the good thing is that normal faults expose the fault plane and create triangular facets, as we can see here, while a reverse fault is covering this. It buries the fault plane. While in transcurrence, we will see that they are small, but it's basically, in normal faults, we have this. This is in the US, where you can see the facets. This is first level diagnostic criteria. If you go to the white mountain range, the Cordillera Blanca, we can see that there are triangular facets along the active normal fault. And if we move on to other areas that have been mapped as reverse, as Safranal, as you know, this is a very mining copper project, there's a festival of triangular facets, which contrasts this map that I downloaded from the internet 15 or 13 years ago, where everything was mapped as reverse faults. The triangular facet concepts indicates that this is otherwise. So this is interesting. This is a section that I took from an app like 10 years back on the structure of the Safranal deposit ore body, and I will show the chalcopyrite area in violet, which is, well, and it's a low mineralization area in gray. We are 2 kilometers north of Safranal, and we see triangular facets. It's a normal fault. If we take from afar, well, unfortunately, I don't have a laser pointer to show, but you will see the triangular facets I've shown are indicated on top to the right. This is the area that I've shown, and you can tell that this corresponds to a glacis. This normal fault then goes below the Safranal deposit. And it is interesting because here we have north, south, and we don't have vertical exaggeration. And we don't have this and this diagram either. And this is something that could explain the abrupt interruption of the mineralization that you can see in this image. And in this case, the continuation of the deposit that needs to be elsewhere, exactly as in this case of the double San Manuel Kalamazoo ore body in Arizona, where the observation of a normal fault found the second part of this deposit. So this might be something that exists in Safranal. It's a hypothesis, but it's interesting for the people who have Safranal. Very well, then. So triangular facets are present in Ayaviri, for instance, and in the Puno region. These are triangular facets. This is a normal fault, and this is mapped as a reverse fault since my French colleagues decided that this was a reverse fault. And everyone repeated this, but there are triangular facets. This is a normal fault. And if we go back, these are normal faults. As you can see here in the picture to the right, there's a normal fault with good pathways and host rocks for mineralizing fluids. This is actually very favorable for mining exploration to take this. So it gives a new perspective to the. So why so many normal faults if everyone says that they are reverse faults? Well, that's a very good question. What happens is that the Andean crust has been thickened, and so far we thought that it could be by compressional tectonics, but there are other methods, by magmatic addition and lateral flows. And this is the cause of the cortical crust thickening, and this explains that we have, when this is thickened like this, the upper part of the crust is fractured extensionally, and this is why we have so many faults together. The good thing of this is that we can compare these. Well, these are mechanisms which have been compiled by a colleague from San Marcos, Juan Uribe, and in the Peruvian highlands, almost all the mechanisms, focal mechanisms, are extensional. Well, this is not surprising. The faults are also extensional. So we will have a way we have a distribution of these tectonics which is different. There's the extension in the interface of the Andes and the Craton. There's also, well, I won't dwell here because we're running out of time, but sometimes compression is the reversion or inversion of the Triassic rift, which has been part of the Andean evolution at these latitudes, and there is a strong compression. I'm not saying that there's no compression. Please don't misunderstand what I mean to say. Now, if we move on to Bolivia, there's a very interesting case. The Tupiza zone has been studied by 3 groups in 3 successive years. Horton published a model which is on top, and of course, his next year publication confirmed the model that he suspected. However, if we compare the maps produced by the 3 groups in 96, 97, 98, we see that the 2 first groups have mapped almost the same, while the other group, the most recent one, the reverse mapping, the first maps were reversed, and now there's a stratigraphic contact, and vice versa. Now, regarding spectronic and structural sections, we see that we have 2 or 3 types of sections. 2 to the west and 1 to the east. 2 with thin skin and another one with thick skin. So we have the same area studied by 3 different groups, and no one reached an agreement. So we wonder if we are going to hire a 4th group, maybe they will have a 4th interpretation. So the basic idea is that the tectonicians generally favor their own specific tectonic styles. And this is real, and this is important. This is real. You can prove this. I had a discussion around this topic. This is what tectonics worth, current tectonics. We cannot, well, in some cases, we have just one cut, and the author of the cut says that that's for sure, that's the truth. But what do we know? We really need to doubt this. This is an extraordinary case. And this indicates that we are working with this publication. We've entered the post-truth era. This is when you select data, you publish whatever you want to publish, if it's true or not. I will show more examples. Some other news. It's a single crystal zircon UPB dating by the University of Geneva, which has allowed to shed some light of this issue in particular. We don't have much time, but the important thing here is to mention that there's metamorphism of the Upper Triassic. There's also metamorphism of the Marañón Metamorphic Complex, which is east of Lima, and it reaches up to the north, which this metamorphism is not Precambrian. It's Pennsylvanian. We have also mapped the Marañón, which is Triassic. This is actually a shock. All of this has been mapped as Precambrian until recently, and maybe until now. There was also Ordovician metamorphism mapped, 1.8, which has been preserved. Another area In Abancay, there were granitoids mapped there, and it's been mapped as Mitu. Precambrian is not Precambrian anymore, and Triassic is Precambrian. There are many surprises here, and there will be even more surprises in the future. All of this makes us create some charts with the transects, stratigraphic transects, which clarify the evolution here in Peru. I cannot devote much time to this chart. It would be too long, but we can distinguish 4 epochs with their respective ages and their respective events. We have fore-arc, arc-fed, back-arc, but the level of detail here it's almost predictive. And I will give some example here. Thanks to ProExplo and the very good talk by Cyril Michel yesterday. This is a slide that I showed at the keynote speech that ProExplo invited me 2021, I remember, and it was about San Vicente. Thanks to the San Vicente structure, I was giving an example of predictive geology here. San Vicente was formed in like 120, and Cyril showed the result of publications that will give an age of 100 to 70 million years. This is pretty interesting because this is not exactly the same. We are geologists. We are always working in the ballpark. And this, I thought that San Vicente was tertiary. So deducting by this type of chart that San Vicente needed to be around 100, it was partially confirmed by datings that we are obtaining. Well, thank you. So this is an example of the basing. Something that I forgot to mention is that in the past years we have worked with colleagues and have worked in the acquisition of Pareni, which is the autochthonous salt, which was depositioned after the Mitu group and before the Pucara. I will refer to this matter right now. Basically, Peru and Bolivia and probably the north of Chile was occupied by the Salinas and the Upper Triassic. I'm not going to give many examples, but the important thing of this chart, of this picture, is that we can evidence an episode during the Mitu time of intense faulting. It was quite extensional, which reached the lower crust in some areas. And this is a rifting episode on the Mitu, Sal, and Pucara. This is a typical rift evolution succession. So in the Andes, we can see this. We have, well, I cannot show this, but you can see this to the upper left side, Mitu and Pucara. We see the Mitu here settled by sandstones, which is maybe the residual salt, because there are sand and shale particles and Pucara on top. This makes Pucara seals a group of normal faults, which is actually, this is something that we see in the Andes. When we move to the seismic lines, 100 kilometers to the east, we see the same thing. I'm sorry, but I cannot show this. Normal faults which have been sealed by the S1 salt. It's salt because it's like deformed like this. And there's a unit with a P symbol, which is Pucará. This is Pucará because it shows, well, it's implying that it's mostly carbonates. There's even something here that we have Condorcia, Aramachai, and Chambará below. So we have the Soraquillo, there's a nonconformity discordance in the Cretaceans. And we see to the left, the upper left, that there's a saline dome. This salt dome is different. Well, this is not the autochthonous salt. We can recognize this thanks to the integration between what outcrops and what we see in seismic. Also, we can do the same right here, and there's an angular discordance between the Cretaceous and the Pucará group. There's a control, and we have this section now, which is supposedly balanced. This is what the author says. And when we published, well, the first thing that I noticed is that the information, seismic information, cannot be seen. The colors are so strong, so thick, that they are hiding the reality. This is based
on a seismic line, but we can't see any more of the seismic information. It's hidden. So I asked a colleague of Peru Petro if they could provide me with a seismic line in order to see it, because I'm like St. Thomas. I want to see reality. What I'm interested is not in the interpretation of someone, but in reality, and that's very key when you're exploring. So when you look the seismic line, you can see the green level that justifies 40-kilometer top. You don't see the repetition. We don't see the repetition of it at all. You understand it because the colors are so strong up. It's just to cover reality. So what's on top is not a lie. It's they're cheating us. There is a case that's a number one of the geo bullshit cases that I know in Peru. There's another one from the same group, and that is telling us something. Is that we have to see reality. It's enough with interpretations that are repeating. They repeat and repeat this. And I told my friend baby 5 years ago, and he shouted at me. He knows, and he is repeating. So it's the technique of lie, 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 and something will remain. So, I'm sorry, baby, but that is a lie. And I'm going to prove it. This is the interpretation. Of course, you don't see the seismic reality, and we see that it's not the same thing. There's no repetition. Then when we go to the other line that I show, there we're going to see, you can see the pillows on the left, they're on the right. You can see the level of Pucará. There's also in Pucará with the mid reflector. In Sarayanquicho, we said the S2 that is repeated. And the Cretaceous, again, the lines. That on the left is the area of Oxapan. No one puts a repetition there. On the right, they put a repetition. It's the same. We have to have a minimum of logic. It takes 15 minutes to reflect on this, that there is no repetition. The normal faults are there. So it's easy to acknowledge what is clear. The classic, the Triassic, Pucará, the SO2. So this, I repeat, is bullshit. Sorry, baby, but this is bullshit. And sometimes you will have to change your song. And you can see here that you can draw a seismic line so that you can see the information. There is no need of using strong colors to hide reality. So I understand because of the failures, because they did not understand the giant structure that goes all the way down to the salt. Why they didn't understand? Because it's a saline tectonic structure. It's a yapiro caído, but it expulses on lateral some salt that you can see here. And basically it functions like this. In pink is the salt, initial salt, and there are extensions. We are in an extensional context, and this in a stretching situation, and this makes possible for it to reach the surface. Since the intention, the stretching continues, the salts start dropping, as you may see. That is when the Yapiro drops and creates a mini basin where the sediments deposit. And up to the moment on the right, we're in more recent street that they are reaching the fund to the salt, and laterally there are much older things. So this looks very much to what we have here. It's not exactly the same, but it looks like. What happens here in reality is not something due to compression. It's not 40 kilometers of shortening. What we have is we have a stretching environment and not inverted. We go from strong compression to stretching, and they are selling us a huge, giant compression. But please, sorry. There are some inverse failures that you can see here. This is another line where the rejection is only 6 kilometers. This inverse failure is connected to the salt and is produced because of the advance of the salt, as it is known of allochthonous salt that develops inverse faults. Also, what we see, how the allochthonous salt is created like Jackson and Hurek. You can see how it, and within the salt there are blocks, exotic blocks, because the salt has so much strength that it creates blocks, and these are in the yapiros that emerge in this area after the dissemination of salt. So it is interesting because the publishing of Carrillo and colleagues 4 months ago, they use the drilling and the dome here. They don't show any seismic lines, but they say in the register of the well within the dome is the Pucará stratigraphy. And Pucará is actually under. This is a saline dome. And this is well known. And this is a stratigraphic valid section. But this is a allochthonous salt where the stratigraphy was destroyed because of flow of salt. And it's a dome that destroys stratigraphy even more. They state that it is a normal column. That's absolutely crazy. I have erased certain authors that I'm sure that they don't know what they have stated in other sections they put. They have raised some exotic blocks. They don't have any stratigraphic information. They correlate it and create a beautiful model without base, where there is no seriousness in the publication. So let me go forward. I'm almost Well, what's interesting, because salt is important, because in geology is the ions are the ones that transfer these metallic ions. This information here on a breccia fault. This is close to the Yankee project, the zinc project, where we see formal strata and where we can see some evaporites, lots of formation of the ferrobamba. What I've heard, zinc is mainly in the east contact. And it can be said there might be evaporation in sounding, but Rio Tinto some years ago they found hundreds of meters of this. If you explore for the elementary copper in Bolivia, there was the Corocoro deposit that was exploited for more than a year, where we have yapiros of yeast. And all this continues all the way to Cusco in Peru. It's quite interesting. Basically, the idea is that we have to look at the real geology and privilege the geologic reality over the models. It's important to get rid of, for example, exploring from my research and benefits of getting it.
And get rid of geo bullshit. Eso sería la palabra es mala, pero sería mi última palabra. Muchas gracias por su atención.
But that is my last word. Thank you very much.